Hello, everyone. Welcome to the chapter on Socrates' trial and death. So the chapter has three parts. It has the an explanation of the dialogue Euthyphro, which is Plato's dialogue that takes place before the Socrates' trial. Then it has the entire excerpt of the Apology, which is Plato's dialogue of what happened at the trial. And then it has a little section on another dialogue called Crito. And in that dialogue is when Socrates is in jail and Socrates' death. So all three are important and you should read all three, but I've focused in on the excerpt that's in there of the Apology. So for purposes of the assignment, what you need to really focus in on is the Apology, which is Plato's dialogue. Now, let me just say something about the Euthyphro really quick. It is an important dialogue, and basically what the dialogue is about is that the day before the trial, Socrates runs into Euthyphro at the court. Euthyphro's on his way to the court to testify against his father, and he believes that this is the pious thing to do. And Socrates is interested in piety, of course, because he's actually been accused of not being pious, not believing in the Athenian or Greek gods. So Socrates obviously asked Euthyphro to teach him what piety is, because if Euthyphro must know, and Euthyphro, of course, admits that he knows. And so they go back and forth. There are two important things about the dialogue that I think that you will get out of the discussion. The dialogue's not in the book, but it talks about the dialogue. So the first thing is it gives you an idea of what Socrates is usually after, what people normally call the Platonic forms. That's really just the definition. So Plato, Socrates is after what is piety? How do I define piety? What does piety mean? And the definition will allow, you see, Socrates to have a standard, a criterion, because if I know what piety means, then I can judge things and determine whether they are or are not pious. And so Euthyphro makes a lot of mistakes in his several attempts. On the first attempt, he gives an example of piety, and Socrates says, look, that's not what I want. I don't want an example of what is pious. I want to know what is it that makes that example pious. I want to know the necessary and sufficient conditions, the form, the definition of what piety is. The second definition, he says that it's what the gods like, and Socrates points out that the gods disagree about a lot of things. So they like some things, some gods love some things, some gods hate that same thing, and piety can't be something that the gods love and hate at the same time, and that seems to be a contradiction. So Euthyphro goes back and modifies, and he says it's what all the gods love, right? So it's a unanimous sort of consensus among the gods. And Socrates raises this important question that medieval philosophy sort of picks up on, and it becomes a central question later on. And Socrates says, wait, is it pious because the gods love it, or do the gods love it because it is pious? I'll repeat that. Is it pious? What makes it pious is that the gods love it, or do the gods love it because it is pious? Two important ways of looking at it. The first point is if it's pious because the gods love it, that seems to advocate a kind of divine demand theory. So whatever the gods love, that is what's good or pious. But Socrates is of the opinion that it should be the other way around. The gods love it because it is pious. You see, there's something about that it's intrinsically pious, and that's why the gods love it. Later, they talk about piety being connected with justice, and this is a really interesting idea. And and then after that, they talk about how justice can pertain to the gods, and how what would it mean to act justly to the gods. Eventually, the discussion ends there, and we end with no solution to the meaning of piety. And this is a typical Socratic dialogue. This is the way most of Plato's Socratic dialogues, the ones that we think that are historical Socrates, end. They end with an unsuccessful attempt at a definition, or attempt at a philosophical issue. So the next day, of course, we have Melitus, who's the main attacker of Socrates, the main person who's alleges that Socrates has committed a crime against the city. The crimes that he is alleging Socrates has committed are two. One is that he he does not believe in the true Greek gods, and number two, that Socrates has committed a terrible wrong by corrupting the young. Okay, and Socrates, these are the formal, what I'll call the formal accusations against Socrates. Now, Socrates points out that there is also an informal sort of reputational sort of accusation going on. This is more of sort of background. People don't like Socrates. He knows this. And people do not like him for specific reasons, and that he's going to elaborate in the apology. And he wants to first clarify this. He wants to explain himself. He wants to sort of tell the jury of 500 Athenians why it is that he has this reputation, why it is that people don't like him. So he addresses this first, and he says, look, he addresses in a kind of narrative. He says, Sheriphon went to the oracle of Delphi, and he asked, who is the wisest person alive, or of all times, or something like that. And the oracle says, Socrates is the wisest of all men. And so Socrates interprets this as a riddle, right? Because the oracle of Delphi, if you remember from your past readings, provides responses that are that one needs to sort of decipher. They're not straightforward. And so Socrates is aware that this is not a straightforward claim. Simply, Socrates is the wisest of all men. So he realizes that this is not the case, because he realizes also that Socrates, claims not to know anything, right? So he's aware that he doesn't know what ultimately virtue is, what piety is, or what good is, or what justice is. He lacks these concepts, or the meaning of these concepts in their entirety, right? So Socrates says it can't mean what we sort of think it means. It must mean something else. And Socrates, upon reflection, he realizes that he does think that he actually is wiser in one respect, and that is that in many cases where he has questioned many of the Athenian sort of Athenians who claim to be knowledgeable people of the community, like sophists, he realizes that while Socrates is conscientious of his ignorance on certain areas of subjects, these sophists and some of these other Athenians are not aware of their own ignorance. They actually believe that they have answers to questions which in fact they do not have. In other words, Socrates realizes there's a difference between believing something and knowing something. And the difference is that when you know something, you believe it, but you also have evidence. You can justify it. You have arguments that can defend it. And you can explain it to someone else. And you can say to that person, this is what justice is, and this is the reasons why I believe that this is what justice is, right? So you have this sort of support. It's anchored in a sort of explanation, definition, arguments. But Socrates realizes that in most cases, people just believe something and they don't have this kind of evidence or arguments, or it's not well thought out, right? So what he says that he's wisest then insofar as he's examined his positions more thoroughly than these other people, and he has a good sort of grasp of his own sort of knowledge and what he knows and what he doesn't know. Where in these other cases, these people have no idea, right? They believe they know something when in fact they don't know something. And so he thinks that ultimately the interpretation of the Oracle of Delphi is not that Socrates is the wisest, but rather that people like Socrates. It's not about Socrates. Socrates is only a model, an example. It's people like Socrates who realize that they do not know, are wiser insofar as they have that grasp, that knowledge of their own sort of a status, right, of knowledge, where compared to the people who they believe and think that they know something to be true when in fact they don't know it at all, or it might actually be false. So this is his definition of and the reason why people have hated him, or the reason he has gained this bad reputation, is because he has spent a lot of his time trying to figure out this riddle. And in addition, he thinks that he is doing a service to other people by helping them, right, examining their beliefs and helping them to come to an awareness of their sort of own status when it comes to knowledge, what they truly know and what they truly don't know. And the only way to do that is to examine your beliefs closely, to question them. Why do I believe these? What is the evidence for this? What arguments do I have for this? And this is what Socrates does. His mission is to go around asking these kinds of tough questions. And for this reason, when he shows or demonstrates that people are wrong, people get upset at him. And this is how he's gained this terrible reputation. Okay. In the next video, I will talk about his how he defends himself against the other accusations, and I will say something also about his position on death and the afterlife. Okay, thank you.